What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 6 preview where I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions and hopefully help you with your decisions as we get closer to that deadline on Saturday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, let's get into it. So let's start with one of the hot topics this week, and that is Rico Lewis. So this is the first question. With Rodri out for the rest of the season, do we expect Lewis to be fairly nailed? Now, I did a Twitter space last night about Wildcard 6 with Praz and Luke. And one of the things we spoke about the most was Man City defender minutes. Luke went into a lot of detail. I'd highly recommend checking that out. You can find it on my Twitter timeline. I'll try and give you the rundown now. Is he fairly nailed? The simple answer is no. And ask yourself this, how many players in the history of Man City while Pep Guardiola has been manager have been nailed? Not very many. And I'm talking to the levels of Salah, Fernandes, Pedro Porro, Virgil van Dijk. That's the kind of players I think of when I hear the term nailed. Is Rico Lewis now going to play every single game? Absolutely not. And if you're only buying him because you think he will, you're in for a lot of trouble. And I think Luke said it last night. If you're buying Lewis, you should do it knowing that that's a transfer waiting to happen. At some point, almost certainly, he will come out of that Man City team. We've seen players that have been nailed for like 8-9 weeks before, and then Pep just changes it up. In terms of his role, he's inverting into midfield, and he can do that from right back or left back. Last night, he played left back with Kyle Walker, inverting into midfield. He did that for the first half against Brentford as well. So really, he's competing for that role. Other players that could do it, John Stones, for example. Kanji's done it before, although not for a little while. So there are other players that could do it for Pep, or he could change the system completely, right? We saw at the end of last season, Gvardiol, he was starting on paper as a left back, but he was basically going to left wing. But this season, Pep seems to be using proper wingers like Doku, Grealish, Savinho obviously on the right as well. So instead, he needs an extra body in midfield rather than out wide. Will he stick with that system for the rest of the season because Rodri's out? Who knows, right? And this is the problem with buying Man City players. I think you need to be, and I've said this before, a certain type of FPL manager to buy a player like this. And that is looking at him thinking he's 4.7 million. The good fixtures for Man City are right now. So if you're going to buy him, this is the prime time to do it. Newcastle away, Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton at home. Then even Bournemouth away in 10 is fine. But you buy him knowing that he's not going to start all those games. Or at least there's not a high chance that it happens. And if you're already tying yourself into knots thinking, well, hang on, Walker played against Arsenal and now he's played midweek. That means he definitely can't start against Newcastle. So Rico Lewis will have to be right back. You might be right, but that also might not happen. So there's not really too much more we can say. He's played really well. He's currently playing that role where he goes into midfield, and Pep's talked about how well he's done it. That's a good, that's an encouraging sign for him getting good minutes going forward. Does that mean he starts every game? Absolutely not. And you shouldn't buying him thinking that he will. He's probably a transfer waiting to happen. For those of you that are on Wildcard, if you were set up with a similar setup to this, where you've got like Trent, Gabriel, Porro, maybe Lewis, and then like a 4 million defender or like a Mikalenko at 4.3, I think you've got enough cover there that if Lewis goes wrong, yes, he's still a transfer out waiting to happen, but it doesn't have to happen straight away. And that's how I would set up. If you've got a squad where, I don't know, you're also taking a punt on Savinho as well, and I don't know, you're going for Luis Diaz, and let's say he gets rotated with Gakpo more often than you'd like, all of a sudden you've got a few potential issues to fix. If the rest of your squad is looking solid, they're going to play every week, like in Burmo. Rodgers at least looks like it right now. Calvert-Lewin, Solanke, Haaland, etc. And you've got one punt, and that is Lewis. That's probably fine, right? But you've got to do it knowing that at some point the system could change. He could use a different player to do that role. You just don't know. Even when he started against Brentford, he got hooked at half-time. I think Luke said it was because Brentford were going man-to-man and Lewis didn't cope that well with it. Could that happen in future games? Possibly, but you're not necessarily going to know that until the match starts. So, is he fairly nailed? Absolutely not. Is he potentially a really good value pick? Yes, but you've got to be prepared that he's going to get benched at some point. So this is a good follow-on question. Would you go for Gvardiol or Porro on wildcard? Gvardiol started the season poorly, but he's moving into more offensive positions every week. I think he's got more clean sheet potential than Porro too. Now again, last night on the space we spoke about Gvardiol. Luke said that he thinks going forward Gvardiol probably has the best minutes out of all Man City defenders. Does that mean that he's going to start every game? Of course not. We've already seen Rico Lewis invert from left back, but more often than not, Gvardiol is going to start, especially while Ake has been out. And obviously you pay the premium for that. He costs 6 million. On the attacking front, it really depends what system is used. If they keep playing Rico Lewis most games on the right going into midfield, then Gvardiol essentially is playing as a left centre-back. He's not got that left wing role like he did last season, but it's not stopping the attacking potential. If you look at the numbers on Hub so far, and if you want to check all this stuff out for yourself and all the other tools, link in the description below, but if we look at his numbers so far, he's at 0.06 non-penalty expected goals, 0.16 expected assists. That ain't bad, considering he's playing that left centre-back role most of the time, but he is still being allowed to get forward. So I agree that clean sheet potential, Man City definitely over Spurs for the next kind of 4 or 5 game weeks. And I think despite the fact he's not playing this left wing role, he's still getting into really good positions. So on that point, I think you probably do pick Gvardiol over Porro in theory, but I do quite like the idea of going for Porro because he's 0.5 million cheaper and just picking up Rico Lewis in one of those 4.5 million-ish defender spots instead. Because the one thing you have with Porro is that he is nailed, right? You know he's going to play every game, and the next 2 aren't great, but from 8 onwards it's pretty nice. Like they've got home games between 8 and 13 against West Ham, Villa, Ipswich and Fulham. The 2 away games are Palace and City, which is not great. But you could even rotate him if you've got other defenders that can play. I know he's quite expensive, but actually I think he's 5.6. He's probably going to drop in price soon to 5.5. Like it is quite expensive to have a defender like that you bench sometimes, but I don't think it's the end of the world if you've got other players that can cover nicely. So the honest answer is I'm really torn between Gvardiol and Porro. I think clean sheet wise, you're definitely right about Gvardiol, and I think there's a good chance that he starts at least like 4 of the next 5. And that might be enough that he gets into attacking positions against some of those weaker teams as well. But I know at some point he's not going to play. And I think for that money, that might frustrate me a little bit. I don't have that with Porro. It's just a timing thing. I think because we're going in 6, Gvardiol makes a lot of sense. But from 8 onwards, I think Porro is probably slightly better. So let's stick to Man City for a second. Would you sell other premium players like Salah, Palmer or Watkins to get Haaland? Would you take hits for Haaland this week or next? Now on the hits thing, I'm not sure I would do that because although I think he's a great captain this week and next, there are other players you could go for as well. So in game week 6, you've got Saka against Leicester at home as long as he's fit and available, which I'm sure he will be, and Salah against Wolves away. Both decent options. And even in game week 7, right, you've got Saka against Southampton at home. So if the worst came to the worst and you didn't want to take hits for Haaland, you've got other players you could go for instead. Even if you haven't got Saka and you've got Palmer, like you've said in the question, Palmer's got Forest at home in 7 and Brighton at home in 6. So he is a captain opportunity as well. So I'm a little bit less sure on the hits front, but I will say this. If it's going to take you a -4 to get Haaland and you're going to be happy with your team because you're just sick of not owning him, I think that's fine. 4 points for your sanity is probably more than fair. In terms of selling players to get him, I'd be happy selling any of those players to get Haaland because I think he is someone that I would personally want to own. Do I think he's essential? I mean, close to, yes. Do you have to go out of your way to get him this week and sell all those players this week? Not necessarily. Salah's got Wolves, like I've just said. Palmer's got a good fixture. Watkins has got Ipswich. You could give it another week. But at some point, something will have to give. Personally, I actually think it probably is easier to do Salah. Probably requires the least amount of transfers to shift funds around. But it's really up to you. If you want to keep Salah, that's more than fair. I don't think he's a must sell. So would I take hits? I'd try and avoid it, but I think 4 points, like I said, for your sanity is fine. And I would sell pretty much any of those players, whatever is the easiest route to get to Haaland. But that's my personal bias. I've had Haaland the whole way through. I'm wildcarding with him as well. I just wouldn't want to go without him. So we might as well do the final Man City question now. What are your opinions on Foden if we get a leak that he's starting in game week 6? My initial instinct is, if we need a leak for a £9.3 million player, is it worth the headache moving forward? And I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit, because if we get a leak that Rico Lewis is starting, I'm way more likely to have him in my wildcard squad. But I feel a bit more comfortable about that, because he's only 4.7 million and a defender. And if things go wrong, I can just hide him on the bench. And what I mean by that is I'll have 3 other defenders that I can play instead. If I've got a £9.3 million midfielder that is not guaranteed to start, that's a big amount of budget to be spending on what could become an issue moving forward. On the flip side, if he does start the next 4 games, you couldn't really ask for much better fixtures. The fixture run that Man City have got right now is really nice. Newcastle not in a good place at the moment. Obviously, that's away from home. Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away. We already mentioned them. If Foden could start 4 or 5 times in the next 5, he's an amazing differential. Can you guarantee that, though? Of course you can, because he's a Man City player. The other problem is De Bruyne is only yellow flagged, and Pep Guardiola has said it's not that bad. And for what it looks like this season, at the moment in the system they're using, Foden is competing for a central spot against De Bruyne and Bernardo. And if De Bruyne is fit, he usually plays. So it's going to be difficult for Foden to get in. And I don't think it's a guarantee that he plays on the right, because Savinho is also playing really well right now. And he's another punt you could look at for 6.5 million. So I don't think it's a case that if De Bruyne is fit and Foden's fit and Bernardo's fit, that 2 of them play central, 1 plays on the right. That could happen, but it is not a guarantee. And look, this is, I always say, this is the problem with Man City players. You've got a player in Phil Foden that was, probably player of the season last year. Maybe Man City fans have got a different opinion, but I think he'd be right up there. And now we know that he's back. He's getting minutes in the system. And we still don't know if he's definitely going to play. And I don't know, for 9.3 million, that feels like a bit of an issue for me. I will say that I'm the kind of manager that shies away from, you could always call him a punt at this point, because I just don't like the fact that if I get the leak this week, do I then need one for game week 7 as well? Am I going to be confident? Of course I'm not, especially if De Bruyne is back. So it's probably not one for me. I fully get why people are looking at it, though, because if he plays, the fixtures are so good, the returns will come. I just think at that price, I personally want a bit more certainty. So I've got James Maddison in my wildcard draft. Am I missing something? And when I first saw this question, I thought, yeah, you're missing the rest of the question. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but I presume it's why have you got Maddison and you're not really seeing him in many other drafts? In theory, I actually think he's a pretty good pick. He's playing really well for Spurs at the moment. The fixtures they have coming up are decent. I already spoke about them with Pedro Porro, but I think even more so with an attacker, you're not going to be massively worried playing them against Man United away or Brighton away. Then you've got those nice home games. And even when you get to game week 14, it's Bournemouth away, then Chelsea at home in 15, and then Southampton away in 16. So the fixture run is good. He's playing well. And if you look at the numbers he's put up so far, it is 0.31 non-penalty expected goals per 90, 0.59 expected assists. Now, I wouldn't expect, no pun intended, for those numbers to stay at that level. But even if you look back to last year where he had 26 starts, it was 0.27 non-penalty expected goals, 0.26 expected assists. So he's a player that puts up consistently good numbers and does usually return pretty well. Last season was a little bit of an outlier in terms of the amount of goals he scored. 4 goals, 11 assists. But before that, 10 goals, 9 assists. Before that, 12 goals, 11 assists. He can get into those double figures for attacking returns. So I really like him. But why are people not picking him, or why are you not seeing him in too many drafts? I think one thing is price. In isolation, Maddison is a decent price at 7.5. I think if you're looking at players cheaper, you've got like Bowen, who's arguably got more goal threat, but not, he and West Ham are not playing as well as Maddison and Spurs right now. So that's one thing. I also think if someone's just wildcarded, they probably pick Luis Diaz up at 7.8 minimum. So for 0.3 million more, you can get the player that scored the most points in FPL. The most points for midfielders so far. And then if you're trying to get in like a Haaland, Calvert-Lewin, Jackson front line, and also put Saka in, most people don't have money for Maddison. They've got to go cheaper like Savio or Eze. So I think it's just a circumstance thing where if you've got the Maddison money, you also have the money for Bowen and Diaz, pretty much. And if you don't, obviously there's not really a massive reason to find that money. Like, he's good, but he's not essential. And also another player that's super popular is, of course, Solanke. And if you've got Solanke in, then it's a double up on Spurs attack, which is fine to do, but a lot of people won't want to do that. So they'd rather just go for the number 9, who's going to get on the end of most of those chances instead. So Maddison's one of those picks that if you told me you were having him in your wildcard team, I would say fine. I wouldn't try and talk you out of it whatsoever. I think he is potentially a good pick. I also think, actually, while I think of it, there's a bit of personal bias that goes on with Maddison. He's one of those players that I think a lot of managers who've played before see him do well. They bring him in and he doesn't do well when he's in their team. Obviously, that's just coincidence, right? It's not a reason to not pick a player going forward. But also, we're human, and it's hard to forget about that stuff. And Maddison is one of those players to a lot of people. So he's a good pick, but I don't think you're going to see him in many drafts. I think that's fine, but it's also perfectly okay if you want to pick him. So let's stick to Spurs for a second. Is Solanke really worth it if I can get Chris Wood and Dominic Calvert-Lewin instead and use the extra money on a defender from Liverpool, Arsenal and Man City? Now, I'm not sure how good of an answer I can give here because I'm struggling with this decision on my own wildcard. I look at Solanke and think you've got a 7.5 million forward playing as the number 9 for a team that will create a lot of chances, that also have great fixtures coming up. How can he not score a load of goals? And it's not like he's a new player to the league either. He's got pedigree for scoring at Bournemouth as well. So we know he can do it, and now he's in a better team. And there's a small chance he gets penalties. I know Spurs haven't had a huge amount and that Son is more likely, in my opinion, to keep them. But there is a chance he also gets penalties as well. That seems pretty great for 7.5 million. But then I start thinking, Chris Wood and Calvert-Lewin, okay, they're not as good as Solanke, but they're a lot cheaper. They're both nailed on at the moment. They both take penalties and the fixtures are good. So why not just get them as value players and spend that money elsewhere? And there's not really a right or a wrong answer. I hate to say it. And at the moment, I can't decide. In my current draft, I've got Solanke because of what I've just said about how good he could be. And also, someone pointed out to me the other day, which I think is a minimal thing to think about, but definitely worth considering, is that if you go for Wood and Calvert-Lewin, you've obviously got two very cheap forwards. If you want to, if you get forced to sell one because of injury or suspension or something like that, there's obviously not as many other cheap forwards to go for. I mean, João Pedro might be fit. They've got good fixtures from 12 onwards. Maybe Cunha when we get to Wolves, good fixtures, etc. But if you've got Solanke and Calvert-Lewin and something goes wrong with Calvert-Lewin, you just sell to Chris Wood, right? So that is a minor thing to think about, but I don't think that's going to be the reason that I go for Solanke. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what the combination is. So if, for example, it was Trent and Chris Wood versus Van Dijk and Solanke, that's very close. And I'd probably lean more towards the one with Trent Alexander-Arnold. But if you can get Trent and Solanke, and also your Arsenal defender, and maybe Rico Lewis as the cover for City, in that case, maybe I'd lean more towards going for the Spurs forward. So I don't really have a right or wrong or definitive opinion on this one. This is going to go down to the wire. At the moment, I think I'm more likely to go for Solanke. I've talked myself into those Spurs fixtures. I think that Brentford game in particular, they created so many chances. They're an extremely good attacking team under Ange Postecoglou. I think Solanke's minutes are also going to be great. And he doesn't really have a huge amount of competition right now either, especially with Richarlison out. So Wood and Calvert-Lewin are great value. I strongly believe that. But I also think Solanke's a brilliant option. I don't know. Right now I'm on Solanke. That's all I can say. All right, let's talk about Arsenal next. Do you prefer double Arsenal defence or double Arsenal attack? And this is a question that I've got a definitive opinion on, and that is double defence. And the reason is, if you look at the best defence in the league, it is Arsenal. The next best is probably Man City, but straight away you've got questions over the minutes of the likes of Gvardiol and Lewis. They could be great right now. Who knows in the future? Whereas with Arsenal, you know that Saliba, Gabriel, Raya are absolutely nailed on. And then Liverpool are probably the third best defence, but I think there is a little bit of a drop-off there. The numbers we've seen so far this season really encouraging under Slot, and they could be right up there by the end of the season. But that is still a little bit of a wait and see. Now, of course, you've got players like Trent Alexander-Arnold that are super attacking, and obviously that is a reason to go for him alone. But after that, the drop-off to the next bunch of defenders is quite high. So I think Arsenal defenders are quite clear of most other defenders. That's not the case with the attack. So let's look at Havertz. Great option. If you want to go for him, you absolutely should. But I could also get Nicholas Jackson. I could also get Dominic Solanke. And there's not really a drop-off there, right? With Saka, great option, right? He's definitely going to be in my wildcard team. But if he wasn't, I could just go for Palmer for a little bit more money. Great fixtures coming up. 3 home games in the next 4. There's not a drop-off there. Whereas with the defence, I think there is. Trent's great. Gvardiol, Lewis, they could be great. I get that. And 2 of those players will probably be in my wildcard team, but so will double Arsenal defence because they just become set and forget options. You concentrate your transfers elsewhere. If you get to a game week where Arsenal have a difficult fixture, they're still not going to be a priority to transfer out. You can just play them because they can nick a clean sheet anywhere. You've got saves from Raya. You've got goal potential from Gabriel, Saliba, etc. I just think it makes the most sense. There's nothing wrong with going double attack if you want to, but I just think it's just such an easy play to put the double defense in and just leave it. I will say this: if there's anything up with Saka, like he's not fit and available for Game Week 6, which I think he absolutely will be. Praz did mention last night on the space that Havertz would then be on penalties because Odegaard wouldn't be available either. But even in that case, I'm picking Havertz and double defense still. So either way, I just don't see what would need to change for me to go double attack other than a bunch of defensive injuries. So yeah, this is a pretty easy one. I'm definitely going to go double defense. So is triple Arsenal defense a viable option? I think the answer has to be yes, based on what I've just said. They're the best defense in the league, so buying 3 players from their defense is not a problem. And also for Saka, who I think is great and will almost certainly be in my own wildcard team, the drop off to the next option isn't massive. And some people might even want to stick to Haaland and Salah drafts and just not go for Saka whatsoever. So going for 3 Arsenal defenders is fine. I do think it takes a certain type of FPL manager to go with that though. Like if you're going to get super frustrated if they concede a goal, that's probably not a good sign. But they are likely to keep the most clean sheets in the league this season. If we look at last year, I think Saliba played most of the games. He got, was it 18 clean sheets? Where am I looking? Yeah, 18 clean sheets Saliba got. So far they've got 3. So you're potentially looking at 15 plus for the remaining games. What we've got like 33 games left, a clean sheet every other game potentially. Like that's pretty good. You'd be hard to try and get that level of clean sheets from rotating 4.5 million defenders and stuff like that. So I think it is viable. The obvious stuff obviously applies. You lock yourself out from going for an attacker, but I don't think that's a huge issue, really. Like if we look at the fixtures that Arsenal have got coming up, let's say you were looking at Saka, he's a decent captain option in 6 and 7. Realistically, if you've got Haaland, you're probably going to go for him instead, given what he's done so far. And then you look at the fixtures coming up, there's potential for goals, but there's not really any games where you look at it and you think, I need an Arsenal defender for an Arsenal attacker for captaincy. Like game week 12, Forest at home is okay. But if I quickly go to game week 12, you've got Haaland against Spurs at home is probably fine. You've got Bruno Fernandes against Ipswich away. You never know. There's other options there. I'm trying to see Chelsea, Palmer against Leicester. There's options, right? Probably not Son against City. And Liverpool got Southampton away. So there you go, right? You don't need Saka because you can go for Salah. And then after that, the next best fixture for captaincy on paper is probably like Everton at home in 16 or Ipswich at home in 18. Like we're looking really far ahead at this point. And in 16, you've got City versus Man United. You've got Palmer versus Brentford. You've got Salah versus Fulham. And in 18, where they got Ipswich at home, Salah's got Leicester at home. So Saka's a good captaincy option for sure. Like he's such a consistent player. But there's not many weeks where he's out and out the best option. There's always someone else. So triple Arsenal defence is viable. Will I be going there? No, because if they concede, that's just going to really frustrate me. But most of us are happy having 2. What's the problem with adding a 3rd? If you want to do it, go for it. So I'm tempted to bring in a Man United defender, but I'm not sure if the clean sheets so far are a sign of things to come. Also, I'm not sure who to go for. I'm leaning towards Dalot, but De Ligt seems like a real goal threat. Now, on the clean sheet so far, if we look at the underlying numbers, if I just go to teams, and then we'll do it on per match rather than total, Man United are sat at 1.29 expected goals conceded. Now, that is up on last year. So defensively, so far, with a very small sample size, Man United have improved, but they're still not to the levels of like Liverpool, City or Arsenal. They're still quite far off that. Liverpool, 0.73 so far this season. Excellent. 0.76 for City, 0.89 for Forest, 0.97 for Spurs. Man United are still a little way off going into this is a decent defence territory. And again, it's a very small sample size. They're not that far off Arsenal, by the way. Arsenal are 1.32, but they have been down to 10 men in 2 matches. I wouldn't read too much into that. Arsenal defence is definitely miles better than United. And if we look at the fixtures so far, in terms of how easy they've been, like Fulham at home was good, Southampton away pretty good. To be fair, to get, what is it? Is it 3 clean sheets so far? Yeah, 3 from already having played Brighton away, Liverpool at home as well, and Palace away. I don't think that's that bad. They were pretty good against Palace, I have to say. And I was a little bit worried about Eriksen being in the team and not Ugarte, but it hasn't massively mattered so far. So Man United defence looks like it's on the up, but we definitely don't have enough data to say that's going to be the case long term. But I do think the likes of De Ligt coming in help. Of course they do. And Martinez is fit as well. Mazraoui's played really well. We should expect them to be better than last year. So in that case, the clean sheets could still be there. I do question how often you're going to play a Man United defender in a game and expect a clean sheet with the fixtures coming up. Like Spurs at home, probably not. Villa away, probably not. Brentford at home, maybe. But I'm telling you now, they will cause Man United problems. West Ham, possibly, but it's an away game. Chelsea at home will be difficult. Leicester at home, pretty good. Ipswich away, not bad. Even Everton at home is not that bad either. So you could argue maybe from now until game week 13, possible clean sheets against Brentford, Leicester, Ipswich and Everton. So 4 wouldn't be that bad, like 4 shots at it. So I don't mind Man United defenders, but then you've got the problem of who to buy, as you've said in your question. Dalot, in my opinion, is pretty nailed on. He often plays 90 minutes. He's done it all of this year. He did it all of last year as well. I think even if Luke Shaw gets back fit, he will play left back, Dalot will play right back, and Mazraoui will come out of the team. But the fact that we now have to discuss it means that I can't say he's completely nailed. So Dalot would probably be the one. I think he's pretty good for bonus, does have some goal threat as well. But he's maybe a little bit riskier than he would have been last year. De Ligt, again, I think he's pretty much nailed alongside Martinez. Yoro will be back at some point. He will provide some competition, but I don't think he's going to get rushed into it. And De Ligt does have goal threat. We saw against Crystal Palace, he put up 0.54 expected goals, scored against Southampton 0.41. He would probably be the one, but can I really get on board with spending 5 million on a Man United defender? That's my problem. If you could get De Ligt or Dalot for 4.5, they'd probably be in my wildcard team because I think those fixtures I just mentioned are actually not that bad. But my other problem is, and I've got a lot of problems with Man United defence, apart from Brentford at home, the next time you're really relying on a clean sheet is game week 11. And there is no harm in on wildcard in particular putting a player in for the future, right? Especially if the rest of the players you've got are going to do well right now. You're basically waiting until game week 11, I think, for the real good run. And personally, I feel like I'd rather just wait and see how Man United do before I go there. Because I'm still a little bit sceptical about how those defensive performances will carry on because of what happened last season. They just were not great at all. There's clear improvement there to not only the numbers, but also, in the 11. I'm still a little bit wary. If I had to pick one right now, I'd probably go De Ligt. Because I think if Shaw ever gets back fit, which may not happen, Dalot was a slight concern. But there is part of me that also thinks Dalot's nailed. I'll leave Man United defence there. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. And if you want to check out the tools that I've been using on Hub in this video, plus all the other ones they've got as well, there is 50% off at the moment, which is ending this week. You can sign up using the links in the description below. If you just want to try it out for a month, you can do that too. I'll be back tomorrow for the team selection video. I will catch you then.